For LSAT reading comp, basically, I find the students who do best mark either very little or not at all. It takes time to write things down. It takes time to read things. And so whether you're doing the paper version of the LSAT with a physical highlighter or a pencil or a pen, well, not really a pen, but at least on practice, or the digital version where there are some annotation tools, I think it's probably not going to serve you well to spend a ton of time thinking about where to take notes and what to notate. If you do want to notate on the paper version of the LSAT, I have a very minimal marking system I would recommend. Marking simply for viewpoints, which are opinions, theories, or hypotheses, essentially conclusions, like in logical reasoning. You have evidence, which is details and supporting examples. And then there are advocates, meaning who, if anyone, is promoting a particular position. So on the paper version of the LSAT, you can make little notations of V, E, and A next to the lines in which those things appear. If you're doing the digital LSAT and you have your scrap paper to the side, you could make a little roadmap roughly associated with the order in which things occur in the passage itself. So simply writing down V1, V2, E1, E2, A1, and A2. So V for viewpoint, E for evidence, A for advocates. So advocates would be like scientists, researchers, philosophers, or even specific people, and of course, maybe potentially the author themselves. And so if there is an opinion being expressed, but it's not associated with any particular person or group of people, it's probably the author's opinion. So you could mark a V with a circle around it if you want to indicate author's opinion. This is really the most I would do. I wouldn't ever underline or highlight or circle anything in the text itself, because once you've marked it, you can't really unmark it. Even if you erase, it's not really going to do it justice. Your eye will always be drawn to the markings you've made on the text itself. And then on the digital LSAT, of course, you're not able to draw freehand. You can use their annotation tools, but they're maybe a little bit glitchy, or maybe they take a little bit of time to implement. And so I don't really see much of a benefit to it. But of course, reading comp is more personal than any other section on the exam. So if something doesn't work for you, then try something else. I suppose one thing I could say is if you want to mark either below the passage or on the digital version of the LSAT on scratch paper, you could maybe write down a few words summarizing the major viewpoint expressed in the passage, which is likely, of course, the author's opinion, the reason they wrote it. So if you want to write down maybe 3 to 5 words or one sentence just summarizing that key takeaway, you can. And of course, if there's a particular point where the major viewpoint of the passage is ultimately summarized, and you'll see this in a lot of passages, there's actually maybe 1 or 2 sentences that just kind of sum up the entire thing, and you keep going back to those key sentences, maybe that's going to be a V with a circle around it next to those particular key lines. I'll get into the digital LSAT a bit more later, but I just do want to note that their digital LSAT has an underlining tool as well as 3 different colored highlighting tools. And so I can imagine someone having a system where they mark all viewpoint 1 with orange, all of viewpoint 2 in yellow, all of viewpoint 3 I think is pink is the 3rd color, and then underlining the author's opinion. That could be another system that maybe could work for you, but of course, experiment, try it out. There are currently 3 LSAT prep tests on the digital LSAT website at familiar.lsac.org. So you do have the freedom to play around with that a little bit. 3 exams, that's 12 passages, and they're going to be adding more in the lead up to the fall over the next several months. And of course, you could also experiment with that system on your paper versions also, but maybe make some photocopies so that you have the freedom to redo those problems later if you need to. So that's my quick summary on reading comp. It's not really as regimented as anything else or as any other section of the exam. And again, like I said, it's more personal. If you do want to improve your reading speed, it's not going to happen overnight because you've had your entire life, 20 plus years, to learn reading skills. So I wouldn't necessarily try to speed up your reading in the next couple weeks if you're taking it in June. If you've got the July exam, you've got a little bit more time to play around with it. But overall, I'd say focus on LSAT prep test passages themselves. I wouldn't spend a ton of time going to outside reading. People often recommend the Scientific American and The Economist, and those are useful. They're definitely higher level than your everyday reading online, most likely, and they do relate to the types of topics you see on the LSAT itself. But I think 6 weeks or 8 weeks is not enough time to really benefit from that fully. If you're going for the LSAT in the fall, or maybe you're planning on taking it this summer, but you're also maybe going to retake it this fall, September, on the other hand, does give you some more time to play around with different styles. And of course, the fall will also be the digital version of the LSAT. So one thing you might consider doing is getting used to spending more time reading difficult text on screen. And that just involves reading academic papers, scholarly articles, but those are of course quite dense and maybe even tougher than the LSAT. So I think The Economist or Scientific American is a good middle ground. And one thing you can do is, and those of you in my online class have seen this before, you go on a site like phrasereader.com. That's phrasereader.com. And what it lets you do is it lets you take any text and copy paste it into a little text field on the website and display it to you at different speeds. So it'll show you chunks of like 3 or 5 words at a time at maybe 200 words per minute or 400 words per minute, whatever you want. It'll display it at that speed. And the nice thing about that is that it lets you kind of gradually increase your speed as you go forward. So definitely check this out. Another good app is Spreeder. That's another similar thing, but has some other functionalities too. So you might consider playing around with that too. Again, this is not something to really do, certainly not in the next 2 weeks for June, maybe not for July, but for the fall, I'd say it's a good thing to try and increase your reading speed. If you just put in maybe 10, 15 minutes a day on that over the course of 3 to 4 months, I think it would have a massive impact over time. And of course, screen reading is different than paper reading, especially since what we read on the computer is typically lower quality than what we read in books because it wasn't really worth making it to print potentially. And of course, listicles are a dime a dozen, right? So I think reading online, difficult text, there's a lot of value to that. And of course, using PDFs on screen, if you can get those, if you have access to them, that's really useful as well. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.